His son promised to attend the biggest day of his life, but the seat stayed empty. Then, in front of an entire audience, a package arrived carrying the voice of the daughter everyone believed had died 5 years earlier. What she revealed would uncover a conspiracy, destroy powerful lives, and change Dennis Cormel's family forever. Stay until the end, subscribe, and discover how justice finally caught up with the truth. The proudest day of my life arrived, and my son never came. My name is Dennis Cormel, and for 67 years I believed that if you worked honestly, kept your promises, and treated people with respect, life would eventually reward you with peace. I wasn't naive enough to think life was fair. It had already taken my daughter, Elena, 5 years earlier. But I still believed there were moments that could remind a person why they kept moving forward. This morning was supposed to be one of those moments. The city had invited me to receive the Community Lifetime Achievement Medal after more than 4 decades of serving as a structural engineer. I had spent my career inspecting bridges, schools, libraries, and public buildings, making sure strangers would never have to think about whether the places around them were safe. Most people never noticed that kind of work, and I was perfectly fine with that. Recognition had never been my goal. Still, when the invitation arrived 3 months earlier, I smiled longer than I expected. Not because of the medal, because I thought it would bring my family together again. At 7 o'clock that morning, I stood in my kitchen wearing a freshly pressed navy suit. The coffee maker hummed quietly while sunlight stretched across the hardwood floor. The house felt cleaner than usual because I had spent 2 days preparing it, even though no guests were coming afterward. Old habits die slowly. On the refrigerator door hung a faded photograph of Elena and Nolan from years ago. Elena was laughing while Nolan tried to keep a serious face beside her. She always managed to make him laugh in the end. I looked at that picture every morning. Some days it hurt. Other days it reminded me that happiness had once lived inside these walls. Today, I allowed myself to believe happiness might return, even if only for a few hours. At exactly 7:18 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a message from Nolan. "I'll be there, Dad. Save me a seat." I read those words twice, then a third time. The distance between us had grown slowly after Elena died. We never had one dramatic argument. Instead, grief quietly settled between us like a locked door neither of us knew how to open. Phone calls became shorter. Holiday visits became less frequent. Sometimes months passed without seeing each other. But today felt different. Today felt like a chance to begin again. I slipped my phone into my jacket pocket, locked the front door, and drove toward downtown. The ceremony was being held inside Grand Wellington Hall, a historic building that had recently been restored. Ironically, years earlier I had supervised part of its structural renovation. As I parked across the street, I couldn't help smiling at the polished stone entrance reflecting the morning light. Life has a strange way of bringing people back to places they never expected to revisit. Inside the lobby, volunteers greeted guests with warm smiles and directed them toward the auditorium. Soft piano music drifted through the building while city officials greeted local business owners, retired teachers, firefighters, and longtime residents. Many faces looked familiar. Dennis. I turned to see Martha Ellison, a retired librarian whose building I had helped reinforce after an earthquake decades ago. "I wouldn't have missed this," she said, giving my arm a gentle squeeze. "You've earned every bit of today." "Thank you," I replied. We spoke for several minutes before another former coworker joined us. Soon I found myself surrounded by people sharing stories I had nearly forgotten. They remembered projects, late-night emergency repairs, winter storms, and impossible deadlines that somehow became successful outcomes. Listening to them reminded me that a lifetime is measured less by years than by the people who remember walking beside you. At 10 minutes before the ceremony, an usher escorted me toward the front row. 3 reserved seats waited there. 1 for me, 1 for Nolan, 1 for the mayor. I glanced toward the entrance. Guests continued filing inside. Parents held cameras. Children whispered excitedly. Reporters adjusted their equipment. But Nolan was nowhere to be seen. I checked my phone. No new messages. I told myself not to worry. Traffic downtown was always unpredictable. 5 more minutes passed. The auditorium filled completely.
Still no Nolan.
The mayor leaned toward me with an encouraging smile. I'm sure he'll make it. I hope so, I answered, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The lights dimmed. The ceremony began. I kept looking over my shoulder every few minutes, expecting to see my son quietly slipping into a seat with an apologetic grin. Instead, the empty chair beside me remained untouched. I didn't know it yet, but that empty seat was only the beginning of everything that was about to change. The applause echoed through Grand Wellington Hall, but I barely heard it. My eyes remained fixed on the empty chair beside me. Every few seconds, I glanced toward the entrance, expecting Nolan to appear with an embarrassed smile and a rushed apology. He never did. The mayor stepped onto the stage and welcomed everyone. His speech was warm and generous, filled with compliments I wasn't sure I deserved. He talked about bridges that had stood because of careful engineering, schools that remained open after storms, and neighborhoods rebuilt after disasters. Every accomplishment he mentioned represented years of teamwork, not just my own effort. Still, hearing those words made me think about Elena. She had always teased me that I cared more about concrete than birthdays. You inspect buildings like they're family, she used to laugh. I smiled without realizing it. The memory disappeared almost as quickly as it came. One by one, community leaders delivered short speeches. They praised volunteerism, dedication, and perseverance. Cameras flashed from different corners of the auditorium, while guests applauded politely after each speaker. I checked my phone beneath the table. No messages. No missed calls. I sent Nolan a simple text. Everything okay? The message showed as delivered. No reply. A quiet feeling settled into my chest. Not panic. Not yet. Just uncertainty. When the master of ceremonies finally announced my name, the audience rose to its feet. The standing ovation lasted longer than I expected, making me feel strangely uncomfortable. I had spent my entire career avoiding attention. Walking toward the stage while hundreds of people watched felt far more difficult than inspecting a damaged bridge during a thunderstorm. The mayor shook my hand and placed the medal around my neck. It felt heavier than I imagined. As I stepped toward the microphone, I unfolded the speech I had written days earlier. I had rehearsed every sentence. I thanked my former colleagues. I thanked city employees. I thanked the volunteers who often worked through freezing nights. Then I reached the final paragraph. My greatest gratitude belongs to my family. The words caught in my throat. I looked toward Nolan's empty chair. Silence stretched for only a second, but it felt much longer. I forced myself to continue. Who taught me that every strong foundation begins with trust. The audience applauded again. I stepped away from the microphone, relieved the speech was over. That should have been the end of the ceremony. Instead, it became the beginning of something none of us could have imagined. As I prepared to leave the stage, a young event coordinator hurried toward the master of ceremonies and whispered something into his ear. He looked confused, then surprised. Finally, he picked up the microphone again. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, before Mr. Dennis Cormel returns to his seat, we've just received a package that arrived moments ago. The audience quieted immediately. The coordinator carried a small brown parcel onto the stage. It wasn't wrapped like a gift. It looked more like something that had been stored for years. Dust clung to the edges. The corners were worn. There were no postage stamps. No return address. Only my name, handwritten across the front. The handwriting looked strangely familiar. I couldn't place it. The coordinator handed me the package. It's addressed specifically to you, he said quietly. I've never seen this before, I replied. Neither have we. The master of ceremonies examined the label. There is one instruction written here. He paused before reading it aloud. Deliver only on the day Dennis Cormel receives his Lifetime Achievement Award. A murmur spread through the audience. My heartbeat accelerated. How could someone have known the exact date years in advance? The coordinator added softly. Security checked it. There's nothing dangerous inside. I slowly opened the package. Inside lay a digital voice recorder. Its surface was scratched from age. A folded white envelope rested beneath it. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. There was only one sentence. It was written in handwriting I recognized instantly. I had seen those letters countless times on birthday cards, grocery lists, and Father's Day notes. If Nolan isn't sitting beside you today, press play. Every ounce of color drained from my face. Those words had been written by Elena. My daughter had been dead for 5 years. No one in the auditorium moved. Hundreds of people stared at me while I held the recorder in one hand and Elena's note in the other. My fingers trembled so badly that I nearly dropped both of them. I had identified my daughter's handwriting the instant I unfolded the paper. There was no doubt in my mind. Every rounded letter, every slight tilt to the right, every careful stroke looked exactly as I remembered. The master of ceremonies leaned closer and spoke quietly enough that only I could hear. "Mr. Cormel, would you like to continue this in private?" I looked around the room. Faces reflected confusion, curiosity, and concern. Reporters had already raised their cameras. City officials whispered among themselves. Somewhere in the back row, someone pulled out a phone and began recording. Part of me wanted to leave immediately. Another part needed answers more than privacy. I swallowed hard. "I'll play it." The technician connected the recorder to the auditorium's sound system. My heartbeat became so loud that I barely noticed the silence surrounding us. The room felt smaller than before, as though every wall had moved a few feet closer. I pressed the play button. For 2 seconds, there was only static. Then, "Dad." My knees nearly gave out. It was Elena, not a voice that sounded similar. Not a recording distorted beyond recognition. It was unmistakably her. "I don't know if you're hearing this soon, or years from now." Several people in the audience gasped. "I hope I'm wrong about what I think is happening." Her voice sounded calm, but beneath it I recognized fear. Not panic, not screaming. The kind of fear someone tries to hide so another person won't worry. "If you're listening today, something important didn't happen the way it was supposed to." The recording paused briefly, as though she had taken a deep breath. "I asked someone I trusted to keep this recorder safe until the right time. If Nolan isn't sitting beside you, then my plan failed, and someone is still trying to control what our family knows." I felt my pulse racing. She knew Nolan's absence would matter.
How?
The audience remained perfectly still. Even the photographers had stopped taking pictures. "Dad, please don't waste time looking backward. Look forward. The truth isn't buried where people searched for me." Static interrupted her sentence for a moment. Then she continued, "There is one person you can trust." I held my breath. "She'll be wearing a blue scarf." The recording ended with a sharp click. Nothing else. No explanation. No names. No location. Only silence. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Then questions erupted from every direction. What does this mean? Was the accident investigated properly? Who made that recording? The mayor asked security to escort me into a private conference room away from reporters. I barely noticed people calling my name as I walked through the side hallway. My thoughts were trapped inside one impossible fact. Elena had expected this day. Inside the conference room, I sat alone at the polished wooden table while an assistant brought me a glass of water. My hands still wouldn't stop shaking. I replayed the recording through the recorder's tiny speaker. The words never changed. Blue scarf. That was the only clue she had left. A gentle knock interrupted my thoughts. One of the security officers stepped inside. "Mr. Cormel," he said carefully, "there's a woman asking to see you." I looked up. "Does she give her name?" "No." He hesitated before continuing. "But she's wearing a blue scarf." My first instinct was to refuse. 5 minutes earlier, I had been standing on a stage accepting an award. Now a stranger was asking to meet me because my dead daughter's recording had mentioned a blue scarf. None of it made sense, yet every part of me knew I couldn't ignore it. "Send her in," I finally said. The security officer nodded and stepped outside. A moment later, the woman entered the conference room. She appeared to be in her late 50s, with short dark hair touched by gray at the temples. The blue scarf around her neck was simple, not fashionable, as though she wore it only because it had become a signal rather than an accessory. She closed the door behind her before speaking. "Mr. Cormel?" "Yes." My name is Mireia Solis. She didn't offer a handshake. Instead, she reached into her leather satchel and slowly removed an old photograph. She slid it across the table toward me. The moment I saw it, my stomach tightened. It showed Elena standing beside a trailhead sign in the mountains. I had never seen that photograph before. When was this taken? I asked. The morning before she disappeared. I looked up sharply. How do you have this? Because I was there. The room suddenly felt colder. You knew my daughter? I met her only once. Then start explaining. Mireia took a slow breath before sitting across from me. 5 years ago, I worked as an investigative journalist. I specialized in corruption cases involving nonprofit organizations. I frowned. What does that have to do with Elena? She contacted me. Those 4 words erased every thought in my mind. That's impossible. It surprised me too, Mireia replied quietly. She emailed me 3 days before joining the hiking expedition. She removed a thin folder from her bag. I kept copies. Inside were printed emails. The sender's address belonged to Elena. I recognized it immediately. The first message was brief. I found something during volunteer work that doesn't make sense. I don't know who to trust yet. The second arrived the following evening. If I stop replying, don't assume I changed my mind. I looked away from the papers for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. Why didn't anyone ever tell me? I tried. Her answer came without hesitation. I contacted local investigators after the accident. They thanked me for the information, collected my documents, and promised to follow up. And 2 days later, every file I submitted disappeared. She spoke without anger, only exhaustion. My editor received anonymous legal threats. Our newspaper's attorney advised us to abandon the investigation. So you gave up? She met my eyes. No. From another compartment in her satchel, she removed a small encrypted flash drive. I kept collecting evidence. She placed it gently on the table between us. I couldn't publish it. Too many witnesses became frightened. Some refused to speak. Others suddenly claimed they remembered nothing. My mind raced through every official report I had read after Elena's death. The rescue timeline, the witness statements, the accident reconstruction. Had any of it been true? What exactly did Elena discover? I asked. Mireia hesitated for the first time since entering the room. I don't know the full answer. Then what do you know? I know she believed someone inside the charity organizing that expedition was hiding criminal activity. She leaned forward, and one name appeared over and over again. I waited. Her voice became almost a whisper. Jareth Voss. The name meant nothing to me. It would not stay that way for long. I had never heard the name Jareth Voss before that afternoon. That fact alone bothered me. I had spent most of my career working with city officials, nonprofit organizations, and community leaders. If someone held enough influence to intimidate journalists and interfere with an investigation, I should have recognized the name. Instead, I was hearing it for the first time from a stranger carrying evidence my daughter had tried to protect. I looked at Mireia. Tell me everything you know about him. She nodded slowly. Jareth built his reputation through the Voss Heritage Foundation. Publicly, the organization restores historic landmarks, funds educational programs, and sponsors volunteer expeditions across the state. That sounds legitimate. It does. She emphasized the last word, which is exactly why no one questioned him. She opened the encrypted flash drive on her laptop after entering a long password. Several folders appeared on the screen, each labeled with dates from more than 5 years earlier. This is everything I managed to preserve. The first folder contained photographs. Most looked ordinary. Volunteers carrying backpacks, construction equipment, mountain trails, historic buildings. Then one image caught my attention. It showed Elena standing near the entrance of an abandoned stone structure deep in the mountains. She wasn't smiling. Instead, she appeared to be looking behind the photographer, as if someone had interrupted her. What is this place? I asked. An old government storage site that officially closed decades ago. And unofficially? Mireia clicked another file. Satellite images appeared beside hand-drawn maps. There are underground tunnels beneath the property. I leaned closer. They're not on any public records. They weren't supposed to be. Another folder contained shipping schedules, vehicle registrations, and financial statements connected to companies I had never heard of. None of it made immediate sense. What am I looking at? A transportation network. For what? She hesitated. Artifacts. I frowned. Historical artifacts. She nodded. Paintings, sculptures, ceremonial objects, and rare documents taken from protected sites. They were hidden inside restoration equipment and moved through those tunnels before being sold to private collectors overseas. I stared at the screen. You're telling me a charity was being used to smuggle stolen history? That's exactly what I'm telling you. The room fell silent. 5 years ago, I believed Elena had joined the volunteer expedition because she loved history and conservation. She had always enjoyed preserving old things instead of replacing them. As a child, she rescued broken watches from flea markets and spent weekends repairing them at the kitchen table. Now I wondered if that same curiosity had led her somewhere she should never have been. Mireia opened another folder. This one came directly from Elena. Inside were scanned notebook pages. Some contained rough maps. Others listed dates and vehicle license numbers. Near the bottom of one page, Elena had written a single sentence in black ink. Someone is using the volunteers as cover. I recognized her handwriting immediately. The letters were hurried, unlike the neat notes she usually wrote. She had been afraid. When did she send these to you? I asked quietly. The night before the expedition entered the restricted area. Did she explain where she found the information?
No.
Did she mention Jareth by name? Not directly. Mireia enlarged one blurry photograph taken from a distance. A group of volunteers stood beside 2 transport trucks. One man wore sunglasses despite the cloudy weather. He was shaking hands with several local officials before climbing into a black SUV. Mireia pointed at the image. That's Jareth Voss. His smile looked effortless. Confident, respectable, exactly the kind of face newspapers liked to print beside stories about charity work. Nothing about him suggested violence. Nothing about him suggested murder. Yet my daughter's final investigation had slowly circled around him until there was nowhere else to look. As I continued studying the files, my phone suddenly vibrated inside my jacket. The screen displayed an unknown number. Normally, I ignored calls like that. This time, I answered. The voice on the other end whispered only 4 words before the line went silent. They know you're looking. For several seconds, I kept the phone pressed against my ear, even though the call had already ended. They know you're looking. The words echoed inside my head. I slowly lowered the phone onto the conference table. Mireia watched my expression change. What happened? I looked at the screen. The number had already disappeared into my recent call history. Someone just warned me. Warned you about what? They said they know we're looking. Mireia's shoulders stiffened. I was afraid this would happen. You've received calls like this before? She nodded. More than once. She closed the laptop immediately and disconnected the flash drive. They never threaten directly. They want you to feel watched. That's how they make people quit. I stood and walked toward the conference room window overlooking the parking lot outside Grand Wellington Hall. Police officers directed traffic while guests slowly left the ceremony. Everything appeared perfectly normal. Families laughed. Children ran toward waiting cars. Reporters packed away their cameras. Yet after that phone call, ordinary scenes no longer felt ordinary. Every stranger seemed capable of hiding something. My phone vibrated again. This time it was a text message. No sender. Only a photograph. It showed my house. The picture had clearly been taken within the last hour. Another message appeared beneath it. Go home, Dennis. A cold wave traveled through my body. They know where I live, I whispered. Mireia read the message without saying anything for several moments. Finally, she spoke. This isn't about frightening you anymore. What do you mean? They're measuring how much you're willing to risk. Before I could answer, someone knocked firmly on the conference room door. Both of us froze. The knock came again. Mr. Cormel? A familiar voice called from outside. It was Mayor Edwin Foster. I opened the door. He stepped inside with 2 city security officers. "I wanted to check on you," he said. "The reporters are becoming aggressive. We've arranged for someone to escort you home." I appreciated the offer, but something felt different. Not wrong, just incomplete. As we walked through the hallway toward the building's rear exit, I noticed a man standing near the information desk. Dark suit, silver tie, no identification badge. The moment our eyes met, he turned away and pretended to examine a brochure. I stopped walking. "Do you know him?" I quietly asked one of the security officers. The officer glanced toward the lobby. "I've never seen him before." The man calmly walked toward the front entrance and disappeared into the crowd before anyone could question him. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe it meant everything. An hour later, I arrived home. The escort remained outside while I unlocked the front door. Nothing appeared disturbed. The furniture sat exactly where I had left it. The family photographs still lined the hallway. The silence inside the house should have been comforting. Instead, it felt unnatural. I walked into my study to place the recorder and flash drive inside the desk drawer. Something immediately caught my attention. One drawer was slightly open. I was certain I had closed it before leaving that morning. Carefully, I pulled it open. The contents looked untouched. Old documents, tax records, a few engineering notebooks. Then I noticed a white envelope resting on top. It hadn't been there before. There was no stamp, no address, only my name written across the front. Dennis Cormel. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in black letters. "You are asking the wrong questions." Nothing else. No signature. No fingerprints that I could see. As I continued staring at the page, another sound interrupted the silence. A car door slammed outside. I looked through the front window just in time to see a black SUV pulling away from the curb. The license plate was covered with mud. The driver never looked back. When I returned my attention to the envelope, something slipped from inside and landed on the floor. It was an old storage key. A small brass tag hung from the ring. Stamped into the metal were 4 words that made my heart stop. Wellington Mountain Rescue Locker 27. That was the rescue station where Elena's belongings had supposedly been collected 5 years earlier.